A rustle in the woodland, a snap of a twig, and Anthony Pasha's worst nightmare comes true. He is standing in the dark, face to face with a spotted hyena. Even the strongest of men would have trouble fighting off a fully grown, hungry hyena. But Anthony knows that fighting back is his only chance of survival. Hit that like button and subscribe right now. This is the terrifying Hyena Attack on Anthony Pasha. Welcome to Final Affliction. Nairobi National Park is a world-famous wildlife park just outside Kenya's capital. It is small in comparison to most African parks, encompassing only around 45 square miles of wilderness, but it is teeming with wildlife. Its proximity to the city and its suburbs is inviting to Kenyans and foreign tourists. But whilst many visitors try to get inside the park to see the African game, some animals are making their way out. Incredibly, the southern section of the park is not fenced, which poses a serious threat to locals who share their borders with the reserve. Often traveling on foot, those who live nearby are potentially exposed to the likes of lions, leopards, buffaloes, rhinos, hippos, and spotted hyenas, all of which are considered dangerous animals on the great continent. One of the most dangerous animals in Africa is the spotted hyena. They have some of the most powerful jaws in the animal kingdom, capable of ripping meat from a carcass and crushing bone. They are renowned as scavengers, but they are actually incredibly adept hunters, often working together to take down prey. Coming face to face with a hyena is not something you want to experience, but that was starting to become the reality for many on the outskirts of Nairobi. By early 2024, hyenas were regularly escaping the national park, and the Kenya Wildlife Service had issued warnings to locals and delivered advice on what to do if confronted by the animals. Livestock were being taken by the wild predators, leaving families furious that the animals on which they relied for food and income were being killed in the horrific attacks. It seemed like the authorities were reluctant to help those who were affected by the attacks. But as the opportunistic carnivores strayed further and further from the park, there was a disaster waiting to happen, and the locals knew it. The attacks began in late 2023. A 9-year-old boy was dragged to a swamp by a clan of hyenas who devoured him before the community could chase them away. Shortly afterwards, a lady, Joyce Wambui, was attacked and killed when she left for work early one morning. Then in January 2024, another tragedy struck on the outskirts of Nairobi. 10-year-old Dennis Taya was tragically killed by a hyena near his home. He and a group of friends were walking home early one evening when a group of hyenas approached them. The youngsters ran for their lives, but when they made it back to their homes, they realized that Dennis was missing. The elders followed a trail of blood and found him lifeless beside a swamp, being devoured by a hyena. The Kenyan Wildlife Service was now working around the clock to flush out the hyenas from the rural villages. The animals had lost all sense of fear. They were on the prowl from as early as 6 p.m., often the time when people were returning from work. Local politicians urged the Ministry of Education to allow students to begin their school day later to avoid walking early in the morning when the hyenas were also out and about. Locals began to believe that the hyenas were different from others. They thought that they were interbred with leopards, moving stealthily and unafraid into the villages in search for people to eat. But the nightmare was only just beginning. On February 5, 2024, Kevin Mwendwa was walking along a road on the outskirts of the park late one Monday night. He was a 21-year-old engineering student from Multimedia University who was collecting firewood near the forest with his friend Anthony Pasha. As they gathered the logs and sticks from the woodland and placed them in a pile, they heard the distinctive sound of footsteps in the undergrowth. There was a rustle and a snap of a twig. Something had been watching them for some time, and only now had the two young men become aware of its presence. Immediately, they wheeled around and found themselves face to face with the dark, shadowy outline of a hyena. It had smelt them from some distance away and had heard their chatter as they obliviously collected the firewood. Stepping carefully through the woodland, it had closed in on them undetected. Every fiber in their bodies, every instinct was telling them to run, but instead they froze, staring straight into the predator's eyes as it advanced towards them. At first, they didn't know what to do as the adrenaline surged through their veins and their hearts thundered in their chests. But then they had no choice, as the hyena made its intentions clear. The predator was obviously on the hunt and had come across its prey. Its natural instinct was to attack the two friends and secure its meal. It trotted forwards, its eyes locked onto its target. Kevin and Anthony readied themselves for the fight of their lives. The hyena lunged at Kevin. He ducked out of the way just as the animal launched itself at him. Instead of grabbing Kevin on his neck or body, the hyena only managed to grab his thumb. Kevin hit the hyena with his other fist and kicked out furiously. But with a bite force of 1100 psi, with one bite of its jaws, Kevin's thumb was severed from his hand. He let out a cry of alarm, and the animal turned its focus to Anthony. For the next terrifying moments, the hyena struck at the pair again and again as they screamed for help. Anthony's brother heard the screams and raced from his home towards the woods. He knew Anthony was collecting wood and that Kevin was with him, and immediately thought that he recognized the cries as Kevin's. He didn't realize that his own brother was also being attacked and was now fighting for his life. When he arrived on the scene, just outside the forested area, Kevin was holding his bloodied hand into his chest and shouting into the dark after Anthony. The pile of wood Anthony had been carrying was lying sprawled on the ground, and there were marks where the young man had been dragged off by the hyena. It was so dark it was impossible to see clearly. Anthony had been no match for the hyena. Female spotted hyenas are the larger of the two sexes, with some weighing more than 70 kilograms, 155 pounds. They can crush bones more effectively than a brown bear and are known to crack open the long bones of giraffes measuring 7 centimeters in diameter. They can chase their prey over long distance, maintaining speeds of up to 37 miles per hour. They are formidable predators. Anthony's cries had stopped now. He had been silenced by the hyena. The wild animal had dragged him towards a stream where it could feast at its leisure, away from the commotion of the family members who were searching for Anthony. Officials were called and a search ensued, but it wasn't until first light that they found human remains beside the stream and a hyena nearby. With little left of Anthony, it was clear that this had been a predatory attack and that the hyena had singled out the two men. After making the gruesome discovery and informing the devastated family, authorities shot the hyena and it was taken away for analysis to determine whether it had any diseases like rabies. Sometimes rabies can make animals more aggressive and bold and more likely to attack people in the open. This may explain why the hyenas were venturing unafraid outside the park. Since the attack, the autopsy report on the animal has not been made public. When news of the tragedy spread, students from the university staged a protest. Anthony's family had recently lost their livestock to hyenas, and now they had lost their son and brother. Students no longer felt safe knowing that the hyenas were prowling near the campus. They wanted more security in place for them. They shouldn't have to live and study in fear, and the local government needed to step up and do something to ensure their safety. Despite their ferocious reputation, hyena attacks on humans are relatively rare. In Kenya, 90% of the attacks on livestock were on animals that were not protected by thorny fences or corrals. As well as being deterred by fences, hyenas are usually considered shy animals. They have the greatest flight distance of any African carnivore when it comes to sensing the presence of people. They typically run away when humans are within 300 meters of them, but they become much bolder at night. If they do become man-eaters, they typically prey on women, small children, and the sick and infirm. For now, Nairobi isn't as overrun with hyenas as other parts of Africa. Ethiopia's Addis Ababa reportedly have more than 1,000 urban hyenas that survive by scavenging on trash and feral cats and dogs. Terrifying reports of the Ethiopian hyenas snatching babies from their mothers' arms whilst they sleep on the streets occasionally make headlines, but it seems authorities are powerless to stop them. While attacks on humans are relatively rare across sub-Saharan Africa, those that happen in the rural regions are likely to be underreported. For now, the Kenya Wildlife Service continued to issue its advice if confronted by a hyena. Do not move away until the hyena does. Continue to face its direction. Make a loud noise and look aggressive. Try to appear as frightening as possible to deter the animal, because if you don't, you too will meet your terrifying final affliction.